Hello, this is Eric Schlorf, CEO of C-Star Medical. Welcome to the first of the series of Fireside Chats. These chats will feature an interview with a member of our management team discussing a specific topic of relevance to C-Star Medical. Today I'm joined by Dr. Kevin Chung, our Chief Medical Officer, who will be discussing our NEUTRALIZE-AKI pivotal trial in adults with acute kidney injury or AKI. Before we begin, I would like to remind listeners that comments made during this discussion by management will include forward-looking statements within the meaning of federal securities laws. These forward-looking statements involve risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results to differ materially from any anticipated results. For a list of descriptions and risks of uncertainties, please review C-Star Medical's filings with the SEC or Securities Exchange Commission at sec.gov. Furthermore, the content of this discussion contains information that is accurate only as of the date of this recording, January 30th, 2025. C-Star Medical undertakes no obligation to revise or update any statements to reflect events or circumstances except as required by law. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing our vision of making our SCD or selective cytopheretic device therapy platform widely accessible to critically ill adults and children who are afflicted with life-threatening organ failure due to out-of-control inflammation. Before we begin today's interview with Dr. Chung, I want to provide you with some background on C-Star Medical. We fight inflammation. When it overreacts and begins to damage critical organs, inflammation is essential to the healing process of critical organs. However, this overactivation of inflammatory cells, which can be triggered by many different bodily insults, such as trauma, surgery, or infection, can send the body into shock and cause severe damage to a variety of critical organs, such as the heart, lungs, and the kidney. This condition is often called the cytokine storm and can result in severe organ damage and even death. A cytokine storm can continue long after the initial insult. C-Star Medical's patented selective cytopheretic device, or SCD, is a unique and simple therapy to calm hyperinflammation and preserve the health of organs. Our SCD therapy has applicability in a variety of acute and chronic high-value medical indications. Last month, we issued a press release that estimates the addressable U.S. market for our SCD ranging from $25 to $33 billion annually across 5 indications for which we have collected clinical data. You'll find this release on our website at cstarmedical.com. Of note, the total addressable U.S. market in our highest priority indication, adult AKI, ranges from $4.7 to $6.3 billion. As most of you know, we have recently accelerated enrollment in our adult AKI pivotal study, which now stands around 40% enrolled. In addition to providing a multi-billion-dollar market opportunity to create value for our shareholders, while providing patient outcomes, the SCDs bring significant economic savings to hospitals and to the overall health system. Our SCD is a cell-directed therapy that targets overactive effector cells and neutralizes them, bringing them back into a reparative state. This helps to restore the body's physiology to aid the healing process. The SCD is a disposable therapeutic medical device that is replaced every 24 hours during the treatment period. Physicians have typically used the SCD for 5 to 10 days in their patient's regimen. Hospitals have no need to purchase additional capital equipment to use the SCD. It is simply connected in line with continuous dialysis equipment that is already available in standard medical equipment in most intensive care units today in the U.S. As mentioned, our immediate priority is gaining FDA approval for the SCD in adult acute kidney injury or AKI. It's important to understand that we have already reached a major regulatory milestone that increases our confidence in achieving this goal. By securing FDA approval for our pediatric SCD branded QUELIMMUNE for treating critically ill children with AKI and sepsis, and is successfully managing a commercial launch of QuellImmune. We believe our SCD therapy for adults has been further de-risked. While pediatric AKI is an orphan indication, afflicting approximately 4,000 patients in the US per year, the FDA approval validates our SCD therapy platform. We believe it also de-risks a future approval for adult AKI population that our pivotal NEUTRALIZE-AKI trial addresses and is approximately 50 times larger than the pediatric AKI market. Another key factor to understand is that the adult AKI is one of the 4 indications for which the SCD has been granted FDA Breakthrough Device Designation. This designation is awarded to therapies intended to treat a serious or life-threatening condition which has preliminary evidence that demonstrates substantial improvement over available therapies on clinically significant endpoints. This designation has many benefits, including a commitment by the FDA to expedite development timelines and review. Therefore, our breakthrough device designation can reduce the time to market for successful clinical trials and lower the overall cost to complete our trials compared to drugs and devices that do not benefit from this designation. In addition to adult AKI, the FDA has granted this designation for cardiorenal syndrome as a bridge to left ventricular assist device, or LVAD, for hepatorenal syndrome, and most recently in chronic dialysis, which is the first breakthrough device designation for a chronic indication for our SCD therapy. Each of these are addressable markets are large and underserved. We are not aware of any other device regulated by the FDA Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, otherwise known as CBER, that has been granted breakthrough device designation in 4 indications. We plan to seek this designation for additional indications for SCD therapy in the future, which would further expand our addressable market. With that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kevin Chung.
Thanks, Eric. It's great to be here. Thanks for organizing this.
Yeah, Kevin. I mean, we know you and your team been hard at work at the NEUTRALIZE-AKI trial. Can you kind of give us a little bit of background on how enrollment's going in this adult AKI trial?
Sure, thanks. So we've made steady progress in our subject enrollment over the past few months. As of today, we've enrolled 78 out of our target 200 subjects. After a couple of months in October and November, in terms of enrollment rate being at high rates, we only enrolled 5 patients in December, which was personally very disappointing. However, we can't force hospital research staff to work through the holidays, and most were off for a couple of weeks. In January, we've re-accelerated our enrollment to an additional 8 patients so far. I'm confident we'll pick up our pace, especially with the activation of our 2 most recent sites, Cleveland Clinic and Mayo. I should also emphasize that we're very selective with who we enroll into our trial. Countless studies in the past have failed because the selection criteria were just too broad, all in an effort to achieve rapid enrollment. For NEUTRALIZE-AKI, we've deliberately designed the trial to methodically screen and include the right type of patients. If you make the criteria too broad, you may end up treating patients who may not benefit from the therapy because they may get better on their own. This can dilute the final results, and we don't want that. On the flip side, if you make it too narrow, it's not good for a variety of reasons, including ultra-slow enrollment. The inclusion and exclusion criteria have to be just right. Select the right patients at the right time. In our trial, we're enrolling critically ill patients who are most likely to benefit from our immune modulating therapy through a process called enrichment. For example, we don't want all CRT patients. We want only those who are sicker. Hence, we are including patients with at least 1 additional organ failure, not just AKI. Additionally, we want to make sure that we're enrolling subjects with clear evidence of inflammation as indicated by an elevated C-reactive protein. Patients that have zero evidence of inflammation are excluded. Many hearing this might be surprised that some who are critically ill are hypoinflammatory. There are not many, but they're out there. It should be intuitive that we don't want to select these types of patients. Why include patients who are pathophysiologically have no reason to respond to an anti-inflammatory therapy. That would sabotage the entire trial. Many trials in the past have fallen victim to poor patient selection by selecting patients blindly. That's not going to be us.
Yeah, thanks. That's very, very insightful. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the subpopulations being enrolled in the study and why those are so important.
Sure. Thanks, Eric. This is a unique aspect of the NEUTRALIZE-AKI study design. You can think of this as 3 studies in one. That's right. This is not just an AKI study, but also a sepsis study, as well as an ARDS study. As we enroll deep into the study, there's been a couple of surprises. Based on our historical data in the AKI population, we estimated previously that approximately about half would be septic and a quarter would have acute respiratory distress syndrome, or ARDS. We're running way above these estimates in the trial so far. More than 80% of those enrolled have a diagnosis of sepsis, while 50% have a diagnosis of ARDS. Why is this important? Given that our SCD therapy is organ agnostic and disease modifying, as opposed to simply providing supportive care, we think that this can show a difference in these 2 subpopulations. This should give future critical care docs and nephrologists more than one reason to put their patient on our SCD. To put it another way, it can help tremendously with wider adoption and potentially treat more patients who need it. This is what we're aiming for at CSTAR, wider adoption for this life-saving therapy, because there's little doubt this therapy is effective, not only for AKI, but also for sepsis and also for ARDS and so on.
Yeah, you mentioned the pace of enrollment has increased in recent months. What would you attribute that to?
Yes, the recent increase in enrollment, minus December, obviously, is due to several factors. One of which is the activation of new sites. In the past 6 months, you know that we've doubled the number of trial sites to 15, more than doubled. Additional sites are expected to come on board in the next 6 to 8 weeks. The FDA has cleared us to activate up to 30 sites for this trial. However, we expect the target to be a little bit lower given the upfront costs, and we want to reduce that. It also allows our team to focus on higher throughput in the sites that are currently actively enrolling. Site activation is a lengthy process that requires a number of steps. This includes site screening and selection, budget negotiation, contract negotiation that can take a while, submission of the protocol and approval by the institutional review boards, site initiation visit, device training for all the clinical staff, and finally, investigational product delivery and confirmation. Our team's focused on streamlining this process at every step to ensure timely activation of new sites. Perhaps the most important element of this, of all these steps, is site selection. Our strategy for this trial has been to work with and activate a broad range of academic institutions, some of them who are top-notch, community hospitals and government facilities, since all critical patients with AKI are admitted to these types of ICUs. The wide range of institutions participating in NEUTRALIZE-AKI demonstrates the ease with which that the SCD can be incorporated into standard equipment, which already resides in all these ICUs and helps set the stage for future commercialization. It's important to highlight that the same physician investigators who are participating in our trial are also going to be our early clinical champions when we roll out this therapy out into the ICU market. We need them to be academically and clinically credible from sites large and small. We need them to publish their experience. We need them to recommend SCD therapy to their colleagues because they believe in it. We need them to give fantastic lectures about data and their personal experience to huge clinical audiences at large international conferences. I believe we're right where we need to be in terms of that. I have no doubt we have the right investigators at the right sites participating in our trial. Our stepwise goal is to inspire wide clinical adoption of our SCD therapy. First, to treat as many of the approximately 210,000 patients with AKI in the United States, and when the time's right, expand beyond our borders to treat as many of the millions of patients worldwide who can benefit. The road to adoption is clear for all of us at CSTAR. Prove the device is safe and effective, get the product into as many ICUs as possible with the help of our clinical champions, some of whom just happen to be from world-leading institutions, report clinical evidence through medical literature as well as put it out in multimedia, and then expand the market further, etc.
Wow, that's an exciting goal, Kevin. I mean, now, can you tell us a little bit about the primary endpoints for this trial and why they're important? Why was the trial design based on these endpoints and not an alternative endpoint such as like biomarkers?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. The trial's primary endpoint is a composite of mortality or dialysis dependency at 90 days. Composite endpoints are well recognized by the FDA for these types of studies and helps us limit the total sample size to just the right number of patients to prove efficacy. We selected the 90-day endpoint because by definition, it takes that long to establish dialysis dependency. In other words, you cannot say someone's dependent on dialysis until they've needed it for 90 days. This part of the endpoint is key because we've learned that over time from previous studies that the SCD is a disease-modifying therapy and is able to reverse renal failure, which is very important. Other secondary endpoints include mortality at 28 days, ICU-free days in the first 28 days, major adverse kidney events at day 90, and dialysis dependency at 1 year. As discussed, the study also includes pre-specified subgroup analyses to explore the effectiveness of our therapy in adult AKI patients with sepsis and ARDS. While biomarkers are important for monitoring the progress of patients, the true measure of success in changing clinical practice is reducing mortality rates and/or reducing the chances of patients requiring long-term dialysis. Those are simple, unambiguous endpoints to measure, but that's been difficult with drugs, biologics, and medical devices to achieve, which is why a lot of recent studies have used biomarkers and other sub endpoints. Our historical data using SCD in adults and pediatrics has shown an average reduction in mortality rates by approximately 40%, with very few to none requiring dialysis at 60 days post-treatment. These favorable prior clinical results provided us the confidence that by adhering to and monitoring SCD clinical protocols, we would anticipate similar results in our trial.
When will there be an interim analysis of data during the ongoing trial?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. We plan to conduct an interim analysis once we've reached the 90-day primary endpoint in the first 100 enrolled subjects. Given the steady enrollment pace, we expect to reach 100 subjects by the end of Q1 of this year. About 90 days later, pooled data will be analyzed and presented to our Data Safety Monitoring Board, or DSMB. And at that time, based on the differences in outcome between the treated subjects and controls, the DSMB will provide a recommendation to us at C-Star Medical and the NEUTRALIZE-AKI investigators as to how to proceed with the trial.
Yeah, can you discuss like how did you determine how to power the study and how many patients were needed to enroll?
Yeah, that's an important point. When powering a study, you need to know the estimated effect size based on previous experience and studies. This is typically thrown into a statistical calculation to derive the sample size needed to detect a significant difference between SCD-treated subjects and subjects receiving just standard care alone. As we've discussed already, the observed difference for mortality has averaged around 40% between SCD-treated patients and controls in the past. We could have just used that number, 40%. But in the history of clinical trials, no therapy in ICU medicine has ever made that big of a difference. Well, except maybe for penicillin. So instead of using 40% for our estimated effect size for that calculation, we use 20%, half of what we have observed in the past. In other words, we purposely cut our expected effect size by half in order to optimize chances of detecting statistically a difference in our study at the full enrollment target of 200 subjects. And that was just for mortality. We chose this because historically, control groups of major clinical studies have always had lower mortality than expected due to a variety of different reasons. This happens all the time. One of which reasons is called the Hawthorne effect, or Hawthorne effect, where people generally do better when they participate in trials. This dilutes the effect size a lot. So remember, we're not just looking for mortality difference also. We've added dialysis dependency as a composite endpoint, which further increases our chances of detecting a significant difference. We're trying to optimize our chances of really succeeding. Allow me to draw this out a bit. The mortality rate in critically ill patients with multi-organ failure requiring renal replacement therapy has been around 50% historically. That's been the standard for the last several decades with no improvement in mortality over that entire time. Let's assume the treatment arm in the NEUTRALIZE-AKI trial has a mortality rate of 30% compared to the standard historical standard of 50%. That's an improvement of 20%. That's one component of the composite endpoint. The other is dialysis dependency at 90 days, as I said. In prior CSTAR studies, we've observed that 0 patients who've been treated with SCD require dialysis long-term. It would not be surprising in the interim NEUTRALIZE-AKI trial to see up to 10% of enrolled patients requiring dialysis, as these patients are really, really sick. So let me go over very briefly how we calculate the composite endpoint. Basically, what we do is add a proportion of patients who die to the proportion of patients among those who survive or are alive at that time who still require dialysis at 90 days in both groups. As we've already stated in standard care, about 50% of the patients we know will die, unfortunately. Another 20 patients among those who survive are expected to need dialysis at 90 days. This would lead us to about 70%. So basically 50% plus 20% in the control arm, meeting the composite endpoint. So that's 70%. In contrast, let's just say 40% of the SCD treatment arm patients die, and among those who survive, only 10% need dialysis at 90 days. This leads us to 50% in the treatment arm meeting the composite endpoint. That's 40 plus 10%. So at the end of the study, 70% in the standard care versus 50% in this SCD treatment arm, a 20% difference in the composite endpoint. That's what we need for a positive study. We need a 20% difference in the composite endpoint after the enrollment of 200 patients. What's expected in our interim analysis? I'm sure you all are wondering. After the enrollment of 100 patients in the NEUTRALIZE-AKI trial, all 100 patients will need to reach their 90-day post-treatment period before beginning data review of the primary endpoint. Once that 90-day data is collected, the DSMB will review the information. Interim results for 100 patients would need to show between 30 and 40% difference in the composite endpoint to even begin the discussion of terminating the study early due to overwhelming positive results. Of course, that's what we're all hoping for, but this is not possible. Or I should say, I have to say this is highly unlikely and pretty unprecedented. It would be historical if that happened. Given this timing, we expect to report outcome of the DSMB's review to investors in late Q2 or early Q3 of this year. While we wait for feedback from the DSMB, we'll continue enrolling and treating patients in the study with a target of trying to reach final enrollment of all 200 patients by the end of 2025. At the conclusion of the trial, with results in hand, we'll apply to the FDA under the pre-market approval or PMA pathway with a target regulatory approval in 2026 and commercialization shortly thereafter. Our overall goal remains the same: bring this life-saving, disease-modifying therapy to the adult market, inspire worldwide adoption due to undeniable efficacy, and to change the way critical care is delivered for our sickest patients. That's our goal.
Wow, thank you, Kevin. I mean, this has been very insightful. I hope our shareholders understand, some of the additional kind of insight that you've provided here today. And so, let me just kind of summarize why I'm so excited about SeaStar Medical's future. I mean, look, we've got a proprietary technology that has shown significant benefit in life-threatening consequences of hyperinflammation and critical organ failure. It's a major unmet clinical need representing multi-billion-dollar market opportunities. From a competitive standpoint and perspective, there is no other therapy commercially available that can modify the inflammatory process once it is triggered to help repair the damage caused by the cytokine storm. Our priority is to gain FDA clearance for the SCD in the adult AKI market. We are encouraged by accelerating patient enrollment and the activation of these new sites. We expect to report an interim analysis in the first 100 patients in the mid-2025 and pursue FDA approval with commercialization in this significantly larger adult AKI population in 2026. We've provided a lot of data supporting the economic value of our technology to significantly reduce healthcare costs, which will facilitate our commercial efforts. Our technology has potential applications in multiple acute and chronic high-value indications. We have identified 5 near-term indications and mapped out development plans and programs that address markets with blockbuster potential. We are currently commercializing our pediatric SCD, otherwise known as QuellImmune, by targeting leading children's hospitals under a direct sales model, and we are confident we can seamlessly meet customer demand that will result in a growing customer list and recurring sales. And importantly, we have a dedicated world-class team that is focused on executing our business strategy and achieving our goal of improving patient outcomes and saving lives. Thank you for attending this fireside chat today, and we hope you will join us as we discuss another topic next month. Have an amazing day. Thank you.